Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a class overview video for Diablo 4 to help you pick what class to play. The different classes offer different gameplay experiences, and you want to ensure that you pick the class that'll be most fun for you. In this video, we'll give an overview of every class, its primary playstyle, some of its key skills and specializations, as well as notable strengths and weaknesses. If you want to skip ahead to specific classes, I'll have timestamps in the description. If you're still on the fence about buying Diablo 4, be sure to check out my review video, and if you did get the game, check out my guide explaining all the new mechanics like Lucky Hit, Fortify, Overpower, and more. Also, turn on subscription notifications to be alerted when new Diablo 4 videos go live. But before I move on, a quick word from this video's sponsor, GNC. GNC is partnering with creators like me in the gaming space to help shape the future of gaming nutrition. In my gameplay, I like to optimize my performance, and physical performance is a natural extension of that, because it doesn't matter how much knowledge or strategy I have if I'm too tired or sluggish to put that into use. We want to support and improve energy, focus, manage stress, promote healthy, easy snacking, and quality sleep, and just overall wellness. So I've worked with GNC to create this list of my favorite products. These are what have kept me going through long gaming sessions, all-nighters working on videos, and marathon streams. I need my daily caffeine to get me going in the morning, and sometimes I need an extra kick to keep me focused and alert later in the day. So we got here Divine Peach flavored G Fuel and Phase Pop Ghost Energy. These are zero sugar and low cal or zero cal drinks that taste great, and while I do love coffee, it's summer, it's too hot for coffee. Then I have 4 flavors of the GNC layered lean bars. I can't get enough of these things. They taste like delicious candy bars, but they're loaded with protein. I try to intake 100 grams of protein daily because protein is real fuel for the body. It keeps you full and sustained. When I'm low on time and I'm grinding content or doing a marathon stream, I basically live on these bars. They have an even wider selection of flavors than these, but these are 4 of my favorites. The Girl Scout Thin Mints, the Cookies and Cream, the Girl Scout Toastier, and my personal S+ tier, the Cookie Dough. And then to shake up the sweet with some salty and spicy, because I love my spice, we got the hot and spicy tortilla style protein chips. Outside of this, we've been working together with GNC, testing their products, giving them feedback to help shape the future of gaming nutrition. So stay tuned for some exclusive products built for gamers by gamers coming this summer. If you want to pick up any GNC products, scan the QR code on screen or follow the link in the description and use code Rhykker15 to get a discount on any single item. Alright, diving in. Upon its release, Diablo 4 will have 5 classes: the Barbarian, the Druid, the Necromancer, the Rogue, and the Sorcerer. Each class looks different and has its own playstyle. You can customize the appearance and the gender of your character, but the overall look and body type will remain recognizable as your base class, and even the gear you wear and your cosmetic options will represent your class's aesthetic. We'll note as well that Diablo 4 does not have traditional MMO class roles. Every class is DPS. There's no dedicated healer, no dedicated tank. In ARPGs, what we tend to see is support builds emerge, rather than support classes. We also call these ZDPS or zero DPS builds, and they focus on taking skills that help the rest of their team deal more damage and or survive better. Now, as you go through every class, we'll also talk about ultimates and key passives. Every class eventually unlocks ultimate skills on their skill tree. You don't have to pick an ultimate, and not all builds will use ultimates, because you do have to sacrifice a skill slot to fit in an ultimate into your build. And ultimates generally have very high cooldowns, roughly a minute. If you do pick an ultimate, you can only pick one. Then key passives are the final nodes on your skill tree. Again, you can only pick one, and these are generally so powerful that you will definitely want to pick one, and it can effectively define your build style. It's either you pick the key passive that best fits your build, or you make a build around a key passive. We'll also talk about each class's unique class mechanic. Every class has something special that other classes don't get, which significantly alters how the class feels or plays. So let's start with the Barbarian. This is your melee tough guy. If you want to be in the thick of battle, dishing out and taking tons of damage, this is the class for you. The Barbarian has a lot of big melee attacks. There's a lot of potential to make bleed-based builds, which will deliver damage over time, so you can tag an enemy and keep moving while they bleed to death. You got some fan-favorite skills like Whirlwind that lets you deal damage while moving. You got defensive skills to buff yourself to stay alive in the midst of all these enemies. as well as skills that'll crowd control enemies. You have lots of war cries to buff yourself, buff your allies, nerf enemies, or even taunt enemies to aggro onto you. Basically, the Barbarian is the closest Diablo 4 has to a traditional tank class. And he has a lot of skills to support a team, so I can't imagine support Barbarians will become a thing. The Barbarian also has gap closing skills like charge and leap to get into melee faster, or skills that bring enemies to you. The Barbarian has 3 ultimates, which we'll showcase here. Call of the Ancients summons the spirits of 3 powerful Barbarian warriors who join you in battle, increasing your damage output. Wrath of the Berserker makes you go Super Saiyan, and you temporarily gain a damage and a move speed buff, and you become immune to crowd control effects. Those 2 skills return from Diablo 3, but this new one, Iron Maelstrom, is really cool. You pop this 3 times in a row. The first time you pop it, it does a big ground slam, stunning enemies. The second time you pop it, it's a big swipe of damage in front of you. This inflicts a bleed. And then the final hit does a huge swing all around you. The Barbarian has 2 unique class mechanics, the Arsenal system and Weapon Expertise, which tie into one another. The Barbarian is the only class that has 4 weapon slots. One for a 2-handed bludgeoning weapon, one for a 2-handed slashing weapon, and then 2 slots for any combination of one-handed weapons, which are used for dual-wielding attacks. Different Barbarian skills may require specific weapon types. Some skills let you use any kind of weapon. And with the Arsenal system, you can actually choose to assign specific weapons to specific skills, or you can just let the game automatically pick for you. When you activate a skill, it automatically uses the weapon assigned to it. You don't have to manually weapon swap. Because Barbarians get more item slots than any other class, that means they can stack more legendary properties than any other class. These are game-changing powers. Then the Weapon Expertise system is a progression system where using a specific weapon type gives you experience with that weapon. You can level up each weapon type to level 10, and every level further increases a specific buff for that weapon type. For instance, 2-handed sword expertise makes you deal extra bleed damage on top of your normal damage while using 2-handed swords. But then you get to select one of those expertises for your technique slot. And the technique slot lets you gain that buff for all your weapons, not just the weapon type that is assigned to it. So for instance, that bleed buff would apply even when you're not wielding a 2-handed sword. So you have this sort of mini game where you will be leveling up your weapon types, but also deciding which expertise best fits your build to apply to all your attacks. A Barbarian's resource is called Fury. You start off with 0 Fury, and you generate Fury by either using certain skills or by taking damage. Once you're out of combat for a while, your Fury actually degenerates until it reaches 0. Fury management can be more difficult in the early game. You may find yourself needing to pick a few different skills to help with Fury generation. Barbarians have 4 key passives to choose from. Gushing Wounds is for bleed-based builds. Unbridled Rage is just a strict damage buff that can help any build. Unconstrained is for berserk-based builds. This is a buff that the Barbarian has a few ways of generating that is basically like the traditional RPG Barbarian Rage. It's a short buff that increases your damage and your move speed. And then Walking Arsenal encourages you to use all your different weapons, your entire arsenal, by giving you big buffs for doing so. Overall, Barbarians are a little slower to build up in the early game, but they become really strong in the end game. Onto the Druid, the Master of Nature. The Druid offers a variety of playstyles. You can be a melee shapeshifter, a summoner, a caster, or some hybrid combination of any of these. As a shapeshifter, you can become either an agile werewolf or a tanky werebear. As a caster, you call upon the forces of nature to summon storm spells like lightning and hurricanes, or earth magic like landslides and big ol' boulders. With your summoner skills, you can call wolves and ravens to your side, as well as poisonous vines that creep around and follow you. As a caster, you have defensive skills that can give you rock armor or tornado armor. And as a shapeshifter, you have different animal roars in your were forms to get defensive buffs. Overall, you're a class that focuses on physical, lightning, and poison damage. The Druid has 4 ultimates, which we'll show here. Cataclysm summons a massive storm that follows you, spawning twisters and lightning. Grisly Rage turns you into an uber werebear for a short time, and killing enemies extends the duration. Lacerate turns you into a werewolf and makes you zip around the screen in a fraction of a second, dishing out 10 hits to enemies in the area. It feels like the 7-sided strike from the monk in Diablo 3, except it's 10-sided slash. Then Petrify is the earth magic ultimate. It encases enemies in stone, stunning them for 3 seconds, and giving you a better chance of landing crits on them. The Druid's class mechanic is Spirit Boons. Basically, as you defeat enemies, you'll sometimes get Druidic Spirit Offerings as drops. You collect these, and you gotta give them to 4 different spirit animals to unlock boons. Each animal spirit will give you a different buff. And with enough offerings, you can unlock up to 4 different boons per spirit. However, you can only select 1 boon per spirit. But once you've unlocked all 16 boons, then you can activate 1 additional boon on 1 spirit for a total of 5 boons activated. The buffs for these boons will help shape your build. A druid's resource is called Spirit. It neither passively generates nor degenerates. You need to use generator skills to build it up. And a lot of druid skills are resource heavy, so as you build up your character, you'll be looking for ways to better manage your resource, like through spirit boons. The druid's key passives include Bestial Rampage, which buffs your were forms, Earthen Might for earth magic casters that want to focus on the lucky hit mechanic. Again, I have a video explaining what lucky hit means. Lupine Ferocity, which is specifically for werewolf builds. Nature's Fury for caster druids that use both earth and nature magic. Perfect Storm for stormcasters, and Ursine Strength for pure werebear builds. Overall, druids struggle in the early game relative to other classes, as they lack mobility and consistent resource generation, but they are a dominant force in the endgame. Next we have the Necromancer, the Master of the Dead. If you want to be a classic summoner or a caster of dark magic, the Necro is for you. Necromancers can cast bone spells, like summoning and hurling a bone spear, or trapping enemies in a bone prison. They can cast blood spells, like a blood nova, or transforming into an invulnerable blood mist. They can even get up close and personal, wielding either two-handed scythes or one-handed weapons and shields, and they can hurl shadow magic scythes at enemies from afar. They can also cast curses to inflict upon enemies. And then they have corpse skills. They can transform the bodies of their dead foes into skeletons to join their army, or literally explode the corpses to deal damage to other enemies. Seriously, corpse explosion, one of the most fun skills in any video game, a staple since Diablo 2. The Necromancer has 3 ultimates, which we'll showcase here. Army of the Dead summons hordes of kamikaze undead that explode onto enemies. Bloodwave reenacts that scene from The Shining and sends a wave of blood at your enemies. And Bone Storm summons a tornado of bones around you to shred your foes. The Necromancer's unique mechanic is the Book of the Dead, which allows you to customize your Army of the Dead. Wait, that's confusing. Not as in Army of the Dead, your ultimate, your skeletal minions. You get 3 minion types: Skeletal Warriors, Skeletal Mages, and a Golem. Each of the 3 minion types has 3 subtypes that you can choose. For Skeletal Warriors, you can go full offense warriors, defensive warriors, or special attack warriors. For Skeletal Mages, you can go with shadow magic mages, cold magic mages that deal less damage but chill enemies, or bone magic mages that deal more damage but are literally pulling out their bones to throw at enemies so their attacks cost them life. And for your golem, you can pick a bone golem that taunts enemies to pull aggro to itself, a blood golem that drains life from enemies to heal and buff itself, or an iron golem that slams the ground to stun enemies. But if you decide, hey, I don't want one of my skill slots occupied by skeletons or golem, you can choose the 4th option, Sacrifice, which prevents you from being able to spawn this minion type in exchange for a specific buff. Sometimes you may just desire a buff so much that you decide to forego Skeletal Mages, for instance, or any of the minion types. Now, Necromancers do not have direct control over their minions. The minions go out and they do their own thing. You can't direct their attacks. However, each golem has a specific special active ability that you'll want to use when appropriate, and skeletons get a button that you'll want to pop to heal them and give them temporary buffs. A Necromancer's resource is called Essence, which generates naturally over time and can also be generated with basic attacks. On top of this though, Necromancers are the only class with a second resource to manage: corpses. When an enemy dies, it leaves behind a corpse. There are other ways that you can generate corpses as well. Some skills, instead of costing essence, consume corpses. like Corpse Explosion or Raising a Skeleton. Effective management of both corpses and essence is key to performing your best as a Necromancer. Necromancer key passives include Kalan's Edict, which buffs minions, Ossified Essence, which buffs bone spells, Rathma's Vigor, which buffs blood spells, and Shadow Blight, which buffs shadow damage builds. Now, the Necromancer is the lowest mobility class in the game. Its only mobility power actually makes you move slower, not faster, while letting you pass through enemies. Because of this, it'll suffer in any content based on speed. But outside of that, the Necro is strong in both the early game and the end game, with the ability to deal both good single target and area damage, deliver good crowd control, and build up tankiness. Onto the Rogue. This is your archer class, but also your agile melee class. If you want to be highly mobile, either keeping enemies at range and peppering them with arrows, or dashing into and out of melee while unleashing rapid flurries of stabs, or some combination of both, the Rogue is for you. Rogues have a variety of ranged and melee skills that let you shoot arrows, throw knives, or just stabby stab, and ranged melee and hybrid playstyles are all viable. Rogues have tons of mobility skills to let you zip across a battlefield like no one else. You also have trap skills like caltrops and poison traps, and ninja skills like smoke bombs and stealth. And then rogues also have imbuement skills. You can choose to imbue your weapons with either cold, poison, or shadow damage, each having different effects. Rogues have 3 ultimates, which we'll showcase here. There's Death Trap, which lets you place a trap that does big damage in an area once an enemy moves within range. You got Rain of Arrows, which blasts 2 waves of arrows across the entire screen like it's the movie 300. It's such a cool visual. And then you have Shadow Clone, which creates a shadowy duplicate of yourself that mimics your actions for 15 seconds, dealing a fraction of your damage. To support hybrid playstyles, rogues can equip both a ranged weapon, either a bow or crossbow, and 2 one-handed melee weapons. Depending on what skill you use, you'll automatically swap to the correct weapon. But even if you're on a pure bow build, your melee weapons will still be useful as stat sticks. While their damage doesn't contribute to your bow skill damage, the attributes on the items, the affixes, these are always helping you, like a legendary property. The rogue's class mechanic is the ability to pick one of 3 specializations. Combo points make your basic skills generate up to 3 combo points, and then your core skills consume combo points for extra effects. In general, the more combo points, the more powerful the effect. So it creates something of a rhythm game where you ideally want to do 3 basic attacks followed by a core attack, or you otherwise work out a cadence that works for you in the right situation. Maybe you know that to finish off this enemy you don't need all 3 combo points, you can stop at 2. This is the most skill-intensive specialization. Then there's Inner Sight. An enemy on your screen will randomly become marked. If you attack a marked enemy, that fills up your Inner Sight gauge. And once your gauge is full, you have unlimited resource for 4 seconds, allowing you to spam skills to your heart's content. If you have a resource-thirsty build, this can be really effective, especially against bosses, since you'll always keep your Inner Sight mark on them. Also really effective for builds that have damage windows. You're gonna lay out your max damage when you're in that Inner Sight. Then lastly, there's Preparation. Every 100 resource you spend reduces the cooldown of your ultimate skill by 4 seconds. And using your ultimate resets the cooldowns of your other skills. So if you're using an ultimate and a lot of cooldown skills, this can be a really inviting option. The rogue's resource is called Energy. It generates quickly over time. You start off at 100% and your basic skills don't generate energy by default. Rogues have 5 key passives to choose from. Close Quarters Combat, which is for hybrid builds, giving you your maximum buff when you're attacking with both ranged and melee skills. Exposure, which is for trap rogues. Momentum, which focuses on getting buffs by either hitting crowd-controlled enemies or by hitting enemies from behind, mostly for ninja-like rogue builds. You have Precision, which is for ranged rogues. And then you have Victimize, which specializes in a new mechanic called Vulnerable. Basically, there are ways you can inflict the vulnerable condition upon enemies, and enemies who are vulnerable take, at base, 20% increased damage. Rogues, more than any other class, can specialize in making enemies vulnerable, dealing more damage to vulnerable enemies, and getting other benefits from making enemies vulnerable. Again, for more information on Vulnerable and other mechanics, I got my video here. Overall, rogues are an excellent class all around. Their high mobility lets them handle content efficiently, and they can bring big damage. but they can be squishy, and they're generally a class that requires more skill to correctly line up all your damage and not die. And lastly, onto Sorcerer. This is your classic elemental mage. If you want to be a pure spellcaster, launching different spells at enemies, this is the class for you. The Sorcerer casts cold, fire, and lightning spells. You can throw fireballs or frozen orbs or electrocute enemies with chain lightning. You can protect yourself with fire shields. You can freeze enemies with frost nova. You can cast teleport to travel across the battlefield instantly, which apparently is a lightning spell. You can summon fire hydras, ice blades, or lightning spears to automatically attack enemies while you do other stuff, like attacking enemies with your other spells, or not dying. You can call down icy blizzards and fiery meteors. You can conjure firewalls and ball lightning. The Sorcerer has 3 ultimates, which we'll showcase here. Deep Freeze turns you into an invulnerable icicle for a few seconds, dealing cold damage in a big area around you and chilling enemies. Inferno summons a giant fire snake that burns enemies over time. And Unstable Currents supercharges you with lightning, making you randomly trigger other lightning spells whenever you cast a shock spell. The Sorcerer's unique mechanic is the enchantment system. You eventually unlock 2 skill slots that are called enchantment slots. You can put any of your skills in here, as long as you have a skill point in it, and every skill has something special that it does when in an enchantment slot. But basically, enchantment slots are passive. A skill in an enchantment slot will either give you some passive buff, or it'll have a chance to automatically trigger under some condition. A Sorcerer's resource is called mana, the classic. Mana generates automatically over time, and the Sorcerer's basic attacks do not generate mana by default. The Sorcerer has a whopping 6 key passives to choose from, 2 for each element. Avalanche is for lucky hit-based cold builds. Again, video and mechanics, blah blah blah. But basically, this passive helps you spam your cold spells faster by removing their resource cost on a certain trigger. Combustion is for damage over time-based fire builds. The more you set enemies on fire, the more damage you deal. Esu's Ferocity is for critical strike-based fire builds. Overflowing Energy is for cooldown-based lightning builds, which helps reduce your cooldowns. Shatter is for cold builds that focus on freezing enemies solid. And Veer's Mastery is for close-range lightning builds. Overall, the Sorcerer is a class that has great mobility thanks to teleport, lots of crowd control powers, and does huge area damage, and is just an all-around really robust class. So, that covers the classes. How strong any given class or build is subject to change as the game gets balance passes, and I expect broken builds to emerge pretty much day one. But as it stands, all classes are able to complete all content in the game, so really, I'd pick the playstyle that you think you'll enjoy the most. After all, you only get to experience a new game for the first time once. I'm gonna start Rogue for my campaign playthrough because I just love the Rogue playstyle so much. And then because I need to have a second character for my multiplayer playthrough that I'm gonna be doing at the same time, I'm probably gonna go Barbarian for that one. But I do plan to play all 5 classes. But I turn the question to you folks, what class are you gonna start with in Diablo 4? Sound off in the comments. Because that's gonna wrap up this video. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo content.